Hello, how are you? Today I'm going to talk to you about one of my favorite flours. It's a flour that I think is kind of magical. It has very interesting properties in cooking. I'll explain more in a bit, but it's also great for those who want to lose weight, for people who want to control their blood sugar, for diabetics, and it's delicious. It's very easy to add to sweet or savory dishes. The flavor is delicious, and it's inexpensive. So stick around until the end because you're going to love this tip. If you love tips and recipes that are easy, quick, and healthy, you're going to love this channel. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell. I have new videos every day, and you're going to love them. So let's start talking a bit about this flour, which I like to joke is one of the most magical flours out there. It brings many health benefits and has lots of really interesting culinary uses. This wonderful flour is coconut flour. This is not shredded coconut. Coconut flour is different from shredded coconut because shredded coconut comes from the fresh or dried coconut pulp, but it's the whole coconut pulp itself, just grated. Coconut flour is different because to make coconut milk, people take the coconut pulp and blend it with water, then strain it. It's a different process. I even have a video here on the channel showing how to make wonderful coconut milk at home. Modesty aside, it turns out delicious, 100% natural. I'll leave the link down here, it's in the description. If you don't know, the video title is here with an arrow, click there and a tab with this information will open. But when we make coconut milk, there's that leftover coconut pulp, which we call coconut residue. And to make coconut flour, you have to dry this residue at low temperatures, usually in the oven, and then blend it in a blender. That's coconut flour. It's the coconut without the liquid that's naturally present in it, just to make that clear. So that's why it has different culinary properties. I'll explain more about that. And the flavor ends up being much less coconutty than shredded coconut itself, because you've removed the liquid, which is where that strong coconut milk flavor comes from. That's why coconut flour ends up being a very neutral flour for you to use in various recipes, because the real flavor stayed in the coconut milk. But you might be wondering why it's so amazing. Coconut flour, since it comes from the coconut pulp, naturally has many of the coconut's characteristics. So it has a very low amount of carbohydrates, it's completely low carb, has a high fiber content, and contains a good amount of fat, which helps you feel fuller for longer. This fat is a healthy fat, and it gives a very interesting texture to recipes, because since it has a high fiber content and is a flour that retains more liquid, it's excellent for achieving the consistency you want in certain recipes that need to be firmer, all while using just a small amount of it. So, let me explain 2 reasons why it's so interesting. From a culinary perspective, let's say you want to make a pancake, and you want the pancake to be thick, like those restaurant pancakes. You don't want it to be a thin crepe. You want it to be a fat, tall pancake. So you have 2 options. You can use the flour you normally use. If you're making it low carb, you're probably using almond flour, peanut flour, or flaxseed flour. If you're not doing low carb, you can use oat flour, which is a healthier flour. And to get that consistency, you need to add a lot more flour so it absorbs the liquids, and when you put it in the pan, it turns out thick. So if you don't use coconut flour, you'll have to add 4 or 5 tablespoons of either almond flour or oat flour. So if you use oat flour, that's a lot more carbohydrates. And if you use almond flour, the cost goes up because you'll need a lot more of this more expensive product. So if you use a smaller amount of these flours just to get the flavor or the texture you want, sometimes just adding a tablespoon of coconut flour already absorbs that moisture and completely changes the texture of the dough. And this is great even for savory snacks you want to roll up, or even for sweets, like a bread you want to roll. It's very versatile, and it absorbs a lot of liquid, giving a really nice texture. So having said that, I have to tell you that you will never use coconut flour in the same proportion as you would, for example, flaxseed flour, almond flour, peanut flour, oat flour. Because since it retains much more liquid, if you add a cup of coconut flour, it will probably ruin your recipe because it will absorb all the liquid and turn it into a crumbly mess. So you always have to add it little by little, spoon by spoon, watching the consistency and waiting about 5 minutes. Because since it will absorb the liquid, sometimes you add a tablespoon and nothing happens, then you go grab something from the fridge to continue the recipe, and when you come back, it's already at the texture you wanted. So, the ideal is that you add it spoon by spoon and wait about 5 minutes each time to let the liquid be absorbed, and that way everything will turn out right. I think the second big benefit of coconut flour is that it doesn't cause an insulin spike, because the net amount of carbohydrates is really small, so it's low carb, it won't affect your blood sugar, whether you're pre-diabetic, diabetic, or if you're trying to lose weight. Because sometimes you might not even be on a low-carb diet, but you don't want to have elevated insulin levels or a large amount of circulating carbohydrates, because when there's too much in your blood, it will make you secrete more insulin and store all of that as fat. So coconut flour kind of prevents this from happening because it won't let your blood sugar spike too much. It really helps to control it, and in a very tasty way. It turns out to be excellent if you're trying to lose weight. Another very interesting detail, which I've already mentioned but is worth repeating, is that coconut flour doesn't have a strong flavor. So maybe you don't like coconut and don't want to add this flour to your diet, but you actually can because it won't end up tasting like coconut. It has a very neutral taste, nothing like coconut, and it works well with both sweet and savory dishes. For example, I have some really nice recipes here on the channel, like some fritters, almost like vegetable pancakes, which I've made several times here. Usually the base is eggs with some kind of vegetable and seasoning. And to get the right consistency, we would add either oat flour to give it that texture or some other type of flour. Nut flours don't really work in this case because since they're oilier and more moist, they rarely provide the right texture, so you'd have to use a large amount. So we just add 1 spoonful of coconut flour and it already gives that thick, perfect consistency for the fritter. And since it has seasoning and vegetables, when you taste it, there's no coconut flour flavor at all. So it's very versatile and really great. Of course, there are also some sweet recipes where you can use it in coconut-based dishes, which bring out more of the coconut flavor. You can use it with chocolate, with various fruits. I'll leave some really great recipes I have with coconut flour down below to inspire you even more. Even though it has several benefits for weight loss, as I just mentioned to you, mainly because it helps with satiety, since it contains fat and healthy fiber. So it helps keep you fuller until your next meal, and even during the meal that contains coconut flour, you end up eating less because it really satisfies you. Also, because it has a lot of fiber and a lot of fat, it helps with intestinal transit. How interesting is that? Because the fiber helps to expel stool, making it more present, and the fat helps to moisten the fecal matter, so it can be helpful. And since it has a lot of fiber, some studies already show that it even helps to lower cholesterol in our bodies. It helps bind a bit with cholesterol so it can be excreted in the stool, so it's really good for your health in a broader sense. As I mentioned, coconut flour is wonderful, but it does have this characteristic of absorbing a lot of liquid. So normally, if we would use 1 cup of any other flour, we use 1/4 cup of coconut flour. The proportion is always much smaller. Or you can add more liquid or more eggs. It will vary from recipe to recipe. I just don't recommend that you take a cake recipe you love and substitute regular flour for coconut flour in the same proportion because it won't work. It'll ruin the recipe and you'll waste your ingredients. So the best thing is for you to try to get inspired by some of the recipes here, which are already measured and organized. I've tested them several times until they worked, and that way you can start to better understand how it works. The idea of this video isn't for you to substitute, for example, oats or almond flour if you follow a low-carb diet, or peanut flour, just with coconut flour, but rather to remind you that it's inexpensive and easy to find. And if you buy a package, it will last a long time because you'll only use 1 or 2 tablespoons in recipes, and it will give you that texture you need while bringing all the benefits, so it's another interesting option. Remember that I have a video here on the channel about low-carb flours, I'll leave it down below in the description, and also about wheat flour substitutes, where I talk more about other flours that aren't necessarily low-carb, but are also very healthy. Let me know down below if you've ever used coconut flour in any recipe, what your favorite recipe with coconut flour is, or if you got inspired and are going to start using it now. I'd love to see your comment. Give the video a like because that really helps me out, and share it with anyone who needs it. Let's work together to spread this chain of good. That's what I want here with the channel. See you next time. Bye!